My son was recovering from open-heart surgery in the ICU, and my grandson flew to Las Vegas to celebrate his 28th birthday, saying, "Grandpa's a tough old man. He'll be fine without me there." He stayed for 11 days, never called the hospital once. But when he came home and walked into his apartment, he found something waiting for him that made him sink to his knees on the kitchen floor. Before I tell you what that was, let me start from the beginning. The phone rang at 4:17 inches the morning. I know the exact time because I had been awake since 3, the way old men are awake at 3, lying in the dark with a mind that won't quiet down. My bedroom was dark, except for the street light coming through the curtains. Dorothy's side of the bed had been empty for 6 years, but I still slept on my side. Habit becomes its own kind of loyalty. I answered before the second ring. When a phone rings at 4:17, you already know it isn't good news. It was my son's wife, Carol. Her voice was the sound of someone trying very hard to hold themselves together and not quite managing. "Dad," she said, "it's Robert." He collapsed. "We're at Mercy General." 40 minutes later, I was pulling into the hospital parking garage. My hands were steadier than I expected them to be. I'm 67 years old. I've buried a wife. I've learned that panic is a luxury you can't always afford. Robert was 62, my oldest boy. He'd complained about fatigue for months, the kind of fatigue he kept brushing off as stress from his contracting business. Too many jobs, not enough sleep, the usual excuses men make when they don't want to hear bad news about themselves. His doctor had flagged an irregular heartbeat in October. Robert had nodded, taken the prescription, and then kept working 14-hour days anyway. The cardiologist met Carol and me in the corridor outside the surgical waiting room. He was a compact man with careful eyes and the particular bedside manner of someone who delivers terrible news regularly enough to have developed a system for it. He explained what had happened. Acute myocardial infarction. They had stabilized Robert, but his heart had sustained significant damage. They needed to perform bypass surgery as soon as possible, ideally within the next 24 hours. Without it, the next cardiac event would almost certainly be fatal. I sat in that waiting room for 9 hours the following day. Carol sat beside me. We drank bad coffee from paper cups and didn't say much. The surgery took 6.5 hours. The surgeon came out at 4 in the afternoon and told us it had gone as well as could be expected. Robert was in recovery. He would need 4 to 6 weeks in the hospital, followed by months of rehabilitation. The road was long, but he was alive. Carol called their son, my grandson Marcus, from the waiting room. I sat close enough to hear his voice through the phone, tinny and distant. "He was at a work function," she said. "He said the right things. He said he'd come as soon as he could. He asked which hospital. He said he loved his dad. That was a Tuesday. Marcus didn't come Wednesday. He sent a text. 'Crazy week at work, Grandpa. Tell Dad I'm thinking about him. Keep me posted.' Thursday," Carol called him directly. I was sitting in Robert's ICU room when she stepped into the hallway to make the call. I could see her through the glass panel in the door, her posture changing as the conversation went on, shoulders dropping, free hand coming up to press against her forehead. She came back in, sat down, said nothing for a moment. "He's coming Saturday," she finally said. "He has a presentation Friday he can't miss." I looked at my son lying in that bed, tubes and wires and the soft mechanical sound of monitors marking time. His face was the color of old paper. His hands, which had always been the strongest-looking hands I knew, big contractor's hands, were still and pale against the white blanket. Saturday, I thought. Marcus came Saturday, stayed 2 hours, and left. He sat in the chair beside the bed and looked at his phone more than he looked at his father. He said the right things again. He was good at the right things. He kissed his father on the forehead when he left and told him to rest up and get strong. He hugged Carol briefly in the hallway. He hugged me, too. A firm hug, the kind that communicates I was here, now I've done my duty. He smelled like expensive cologne. I walked him to the elevator. The doors opened and he stepped in and turned around, and I noticed the small relief in his face, the nearly invisible exhale of someone who has completed an unpleasant task. I said, "Your father is going to need people around him through this." He nodded. "I know, Grandpa." Carol's great. And you're here. He's in good hands. The elevator doors closed. I stood in the corridor. Fluorescent light, the squeak of a nurse's shoes somewhere behind me, the distant sound of a television from someone's room. I went back to Robert's room and sat down and held my son's hand and thought about my grandson's face in that elevator. The following Monday, Carol found me in the hospital cafeteria around noon. She set her tray down across from mine and sat, and for a moment we just looked at each other the way people do when they're carrying the same weight. She told me that Marcus had asked her, that morning, when Robert would be back on his feet, when the business would be running again, whether the quarterly distributions were going to be affected by the medical leave. Robert owned a contracting company that Marcus worked for in a senior capacity, drawing a generous salary for doing what Robert diplomatically described as client relations, and what Carol described, less diplomatically, as showing up when he felt like it. I put down my fork. He asked about the distributions, I said. The words hung there between the mediocre food and the cafeteria noise. She nodded, not looking at me. That afternoon, I was sitting with Robert during one of his more alert periods. The medication made him foggy, but he had windows of clarity, and in one of those windows he looked at me and asked if Marcus had called. He called this morning, I said, which was true, as far as it went. Robert nodded slowly. He's a busy kid. He's 28, I said. Robert almost smiled. He gets it from me. The work, the drive. I didn't say anything to that. I looked at the window instead. February sky, flat and gray over the parking structure. A single pigeon on the window ledge outside, completely indifferent to everything. The following Thursday, 12 days after the surgery, Marcus texted me directly. Not Carol, me. Hey, Grandpa. So my birthday is coming up next week, the 21st. The guys have been planning this Vegas trip for months. Feel weird about it, given everything. What do you think? I read the text 3 times. I set the phone on the kitchen table and looked at it. Outside, the neighbor's dog was barking at something in the alley. I picked the phone back up. I wrote, "Your father is still in the ICU, Marcus. You should be here." I sent it. Watched the 3 dots appear and disappear twice. His reply came 4 minutes later. I know. And I feel terrible about it. I do. But Carol's there, and you're there. And this trip has been planned for like 6 months. The guys already bought their flights. I'll come see him right when I get back. I promise. It's only 5 days. I set the phone face down on the table. 5 days. 5 days stretched into 11, as it turned out. But I didn't know that yet. I didn't respond to the text. I got in my car and drove to the hospital and sat with my son for 4 hours and read to him from a baseball history book he'd loved since his 20s, the one that used to sit on his childhood bedroom shelf and now sat on mine. His breathing was labored. The nurses said his progress was on track, but on track for a bypass patient looked nothing like the son I knew. He seemed diminished in a way that had nothing to do with the surgery, like something had gone out. February 21st. Marcus's 28th birthday. I was at the hospital by 7 in the morning. Robert had a difficult night, the overnight nurse told me. Irregular rhythm. They'd adjusted his medication. My phone buzzed at 10:15. A text from an unfamiliar number, Marcus's friend Danny, whom I'd met twice at Thanksgiving. Hey, Mr. Wallace. Marcus wanted me to pass along happy birthday wishes from Vegas. He says tell his dad and you hello. Pic attached. The photo was Marcus at a casino, grinning under neon light, a cocktail glass raised, surrounded by 5 or 6 young men doing the same. The kind of photo that communicates, look how well I'm doing, look how much fun I have. I stared at the photo for a long time. Then I saved it. I drove home that evening and sat at Dorothy's kitchen table, which I still thought of as Dorothy's kitchen table even 6 years after, and I opened my laptop. I had never been especially good with computers, but I had learned what I needed to learn. I typed slowly, deliberately. I had things to find out. Marcus was my sole beneficiary, had been since Dorothy died. The will was straightforward and simple. The house, the savings, and my share of a small commercial property I co-owned downtown, which had appreciated considerably since I purchased it in 1993. All of it, upon my death, to Marcus James Wallace. I sat with that fact for a while. My neighbor Frank was a retired attorney, Family law mostly, not estate work, but he knew people. I called him the next morning from the hospital parking lot before I went inside. Frank listened without interrupting. That was one of his qualities I had always appreciated. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I can give you the name of a woman at Bridger and Holt. She does estate work. Good, thorough. Give her a call and tell her I sent you." I wrote the name down on the back of an envelope from my glove compartment. Ellen Marsh. Ellen Marsh had an opening Friday afternoon. I told her everything, beginning to end, and while I talked she made notes on a yellow legal pad in handwriting so small I couldn't have read it if I tried. When I finished, she looked at me directly and said, "You can disinherit an adult grandchild in this state. You'd need to be explicit about the intent. The language has to make clear it's deliberate and not an oversight. I can draft something airtight. Do you want to think about it first?" "I don't need to think about it," I said. She held my gaze for a moment, then nodded and turned to her keyboard. I told her about the Millbrook Community Foundation, which Dorothy had volunteered with for 11 years before she got sick. They ran after-school programs for kids in the lower-income neighborhoods east of downtown. Dorothy had tutored reading there twice a week every autumn. She'd talked about those kids at dinner the way other people talked about their own family. Ellen typed steadily. She asked about the total estate value, and I told her. The number was larger than most people would have guessed by looking at me. I had lived carefully for 40 years, the way people do when they remember what careful living is worth. The house was paid off. The commercial property had done very well. The savings account reflected 4 decades of not buying things I didn't need. She looked at the number, then at me, then back at her screen. She said, "This will fund a lot of after-school programs." "Dorothy would have loved that," I said. Ellen had the draft ready in 40 minutes. She read the key language aloud. "I, Edward Francis Wallace, being of sound mind, do hereby intentionally make no provision for my grandson, Marcus James Wallace. This disinheritance is deliberate and not the result of oversight or omission. My entire estate is directed to the Millbrook Community Foundation in memory of my wife, Dorothy Ann Wallace." The words hung in the afternoon light of that office. Oak paneling, law books, a small framed photo of what I assumed were Ellen's children on the credenza behind her desk. She asked if I was certain. I said, "My son is lying in a hospital bed recovering from heart surgery, and his son is in Las Vegas posting photographs of himself with cocktails." She nodded. 2 witnesses came in from the adjacent offices. The document was signed, witnessed, notarized. Ellen made copies, sealed the original in an envelope, and handed it to me. I drove back to the hospital and sat with Robert for 3 hours. He slept most of the time. I read the baseball book. The nurses came and went. Outside the window, February showed no signs of becoming March. Before I left, the charge nurse on the floor, a no-nonsense woman named Patricia, who had worked that ward for 20 years, and had the bearing of someone who had seen everything and been surprised by very little, stopped me in the corridor. She said, "Mr. Wallace," I wanted to ask. "Your grandson, will he be coming by soon? Your son asks about him sometimes." "What does he ask?" She said, "He asks if Marcus has called." I thanked her and went to the elevator. The documentation I began collecting felt less like gathering evidence and more like keeping a record of something I needed to understand myself. Every morning, I checked Marcus's social media through his cousin's account, since Marcus had set his profile to private for family. The photos came steadily. February 22nd. A hotel pool, somewhere on the strip, Marcus in sunglasses, laughing at something off camera. Caption: "Birthday week properly launched." February 23rd. A steakhouse, group photo, everyone in blazers. The kind of restaurant where the portions are small and the prices are large. Caption: "The boys showed up right." February 24th. A sports book during a game, Marcus in a team jersey I didn't recognize, a beer in each hand. Caption: "This city doesn't sleep, and neither are we." I printed each one. I put them in a manila folder I kept in the desk drawer in Dorothy's study, which I'd barely touched since she died. The folder grew. I labeled it carefully. Meanwhile, Robert's recovery continued its slow, uneven progress. There were good days and bad days. On a good day, he was alert, joking with the nurses, talking about getting back to the business. On a bad day, the pain was visible in every breath, and his eyes had that faraway quality that frightened me more than I let him see. Carol was there every morning by 8. She went home in the evenings to sleep, but just barely. She had shadows under her eyes that deepened as the days went on. She didn't mention Marcus. After the first week, she stopped mentioning him at all, which told me more than mentioning him would have. February 26th. Marcus posted a video, the first video, a short clip of himself at a rooftop bar at what appeared to be sunset, the skyline blazing behind him. He was talking to the camera, relaxed and easy, the way young people are easy on camera now, as though there's no gap between the life they're living and the performance of it. He said, "Day 6 in paradise, shout out to the boys. Taking care of business. Day 6. He'd said 5 days. I picked up my phone and texted him, "Your father had a difficult night Wednesday. The doctor adjusted his medication again. Please call the hospital and ask for Patricia on the 4th floor. She can give you an update." I waited. 4 hours later. "Okay. Thanks for letting me know." I screenshot it, added it to the folder. February 28th. He posted a photo at what appeared to be a nightclub, a wall of sound and light behind him, arm around a woman I didn't recognize, grinning the grin of a person who has no weight on him. March 1st. A buffet photo. Piled plates, ridiculous excess, laughing men. Caption, "When in Vegas." March 2nd. A poolside photo. Mid-afternoon. Marcus lying on a lounge chair with sunglasses and a frozen drink. Caption, "Rest day. Recharging. Self-care is not selfish." I read that one twice. Self-care is not selfish. I was sitting in room 412 of Mercy General when I read it, my son asleep 3 feet away, the heart monitor marking the beats we'd nearly lost. The afternoon sun came through the window at a low winter angle, long rectangles of light across the floor. A get-well card from Robert's business partner sat on the bedside table, several from his crew, one from Mrs. Hendricks down our old street, who was in her 80s and had hand-addressed the envelope in shaking letters. Nothing from Marcus. Robert stirred. He opened his eyes and looked at me, and for a moment there was the old Robert in there, sharp and present. "Has my son called?" he asked. "He's called," I said, which was technically true in the earliest days. "He loves you." Robert nodded slowly. He closed his eyes again. "I know he's busy. He's got a lot going on." I looked at my hands in my lap. Dorothy's wedding ring was on my right hand now. I'd moved it there the week after she died, and hadn't moved it since. The gold was worn smooth on the inside from 40 years against her finger. "Robert," I said quietly. He was already asleep. On March 3rd, I counted. Marcus had been gone 11 days. He had made 2 phone calls in the first 48 hours, both brief. Since then, nothing. 12 posts on social media. 0 calls to the hospital. 0 calls to his father's room. I texted him again on the 3rd. 2 weeks since surgery. "Your dad is asking about you. When are you coming back?" His reply came 90 minutes later. "Heading back soon. Sorry, time got away from me. Give Dad my love." Time got away from me. I sat with that phrase in the hospital cafeteria. Coffee cooling in front of me. Time got away from me. As though time were a thing that escaped you without any decisions being made. As though 11 days in Las Vegas while your father recovered from heart surgery were something that simply happened. Like weather. I added the text to the folder. March 4th. Marcus's last post from Vegas. A casino floor photo, chips stacked on a table. His face turned toward the camera with an expression of mock surprise, theatrical delight. Caption, "See you next time, Vegas. Back to reality. Back to reality." I looked at the post for a long time. Then I went into Dorothy's study and opened the desk drawer and laid out every printed photo in chronological order across the surface of her desk. 12 posts. 2 text exchanges. Nothing from the hospital phone records. Nothing. I stood over the desk and looked at it, all arranged like that, and something settled in my chest that wasn't grief and wasn't anger exactly. Something quieter and more resolved. I went to the kitchen and made coffee and sat at the table, and I thought about the apartment. Marcus lived in an apartment on the north side of the city, a two-bedroom in a building that had been renovated about 5 years ago. The kind of place with a gym in the lobby and a rooftop deck that never got used in February. He paid $1,850 a month in rent. He had always paid it himself, which I had respected, until Carol mentioned once, carefully, that Robert had been supplementing the rent with a monthly transfer since Marcus started at the company to account for the gap between Marcus's salary and Marcus's lifestyle. The apartment building was owned by a management company. The management company was owned by a partnership that included, as I had been aware for some time, me. My commercial property stake had been structured into various holdings over the years. One of those holdings was a 15% interest in Northside Property Management. I hadn't thought about this in years. It was the kind of thing that sat in your portfolio and threw off a modest return and required nothing of you. I called Frank again. He listened. Then he said, carefully, "What exactly are you thinking?" I told him. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You know, the tenancy is a separate matter from the inheritance. You'd need to go through proper channels, give proper notice, everything by the book." "Of course," I said. He gave me the name of the managing partner at Northside. I called the managing partner the next morning. His name was Greg, and he had the polished efficiency of someone who managed things for a living. I explained that the tenant in Unit 4B, Marcus Wallace, would be receiving written notice of non-renewal of lease, effective 60 days from the first of the month. I asked that the notice be delivered by certified mail and that I be sent a copy. Greg paused briefly, then said, "Absolutely, Mr. Wallace. I'll have that processed today." I thanked him and hung up and sat in the kitchen for a while. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, the first real signs of spring were starting, the forsythia along the back fence showing yellow at the tips. Dorothy had planted that forsythia the spring Marcus was born. She'd been so pleased with herself about it. March 6th. I drove to the airport, not to meet Marcus. I didn't know exactly when he was landing. I drove to the airport because I had an errand near there, and because the drive helped me think. Robert had been moved out of the ICU that morning. This was good news, significant good news, the kind that meant the worst was likely behind us. When I'd arrived at the hospital, Carol was already there, her eyes red from relieved crying, holding Robert's hand while he slept in his new room with actual daylight coming through the window. She looked up when I came in. She said, "He's going to be okay." I said, "I know. I always knew." That was a lie. There had been 4 days in the first 2 weeks when I hadn't known anything of the sort, but she needed to hear it, and it was true enough now, so I said it. I told Robert about the room change when he woke. He smiled with real warmth for the first time in weeks. He said, "What day is it?" "Thursday," I told him. March 6th. He processed this. He'd lost track of time in there. "The way you do," he asked. "Has Marcus been in?" I paused for the length of a breath. I said, "He's been in touch." Robert nodded. He said, "He needs to focus on the business while I'm down. Can't have both of us out." I looked at the window. The room faced a courtyard, and there was a bench in the courtyard where a woman was sitting reading a paperback despite the cold. Someone waiting. The way hospitals are full of people waiting. Marcus called me that evening from his car, driving home from the airport. He sounded tired in the self-congratulatory way of someone who has enjoyed himself tremendously and is now prepared to acknowledge that reality exists. "Grandpa, I'm back." "How's Dad?" "He's out of the ICU," I said. "Oh, that's great. That's really great. I'm going to go see him tomorrow." "He doesn't know you've been gone 11 days, I said. A pause. "Grandpa, I told you. The guys had been planning. I know what you told me," I said. The silence that followed had a particular quality to it. "I'll go see him tomorrow," Marcus said again, carefully. After we hung up, I opened the desk drawer and took out the manila folder. I held it for a moment, all that paper inside it. Then I went to his apartment. Not that evening. I want to be precise. I went 2 days later, on the Saturday, when I knew from Marcus's own text to me that he would be at a client lunch until 3. I had a key. He'd given me a key 2 Christmases ago, in case of emergency, and I had carried it since on the same ring as my car keys. Never used. I let myself in. The apartment was neat in the way young men's apartments are neat when a cleaning service comes weekly. Everything expensive, everything slightly impersonal, the taste of someone who has paid someone else to have taste for them. A large television, good furniture, a kitchen that showed little evidence of cooking. On his kitchen counter I set a large white envelope. On the front, in my handwriting, Marcus, open immediately. Inside the envelope, a copy of the revised will. A copy of the non-renewal of lease notice, which had arrived by certified mail 3 days prior, meaning he had already received his copy but had not yet mentioned it to me. A single page, typed, which I had written myself the night before at Dorothy's kitchen table, one finger at a time. Marcus, I wrote, by the time you read this, you will have seen the will and the lease notice. I want to explain why, in my own words, before you hear it from anyone else. Your father has been in the hospital for nearly a month recovering from open heart surgery. During that time, you visited once, for 2 hours. You then spent 11 days in Las Vegas and posted 12 times on social media. You responded to my texts with single words. You never once called the hospital to ask how your father's pain levels were, what medications he was on, whether he was sleeping, whether he was afraid. He asked for you every day. Not every day, but more than you would want to know. I am 67 years old. Your grandmother died 6 years ago. When she was dying, your father slept in a chair beside her bed for 9 nights. He drove 4 hours each way to be there on the days that mattered. He held her hand when she took her last breath. I was there. I saw what love looks like when it's not convenient. What you showed is not a mistake. A mistake is forgetting an appointment, saying the wrong thing, choosing badly in a moment of pressure. What you showed was a sustained, deliberate choice, made over 11 days, to prioritize your own comfort over your father's life. You will inherit nothing from me upon my death. The estate has been redirected to the Millbrook Community Foundation in memory of your grandmother, who spent 11 years of her life giving to that place. Children who need help with reading will benefit. Dorothy would have been glad. You will also need to find a new apartment by May 1st. That notice was sent through proper channels and is entirely legal. This is not punishment. It is consequence. Your grandfather, Edward Wallace. I left the envelope on the counter, propped against the backsplash, so it was the first thing you'd see coming in from the front door. I looked around the apartment one last time, that expensive, impersonal space. Then I let myself out and locked the door behind me and drove back to the hospital to sit with my son. Robert was in good spirits that Saturday. He'd eaten most of his lunch, which was an occasion in itself. Carol had brought in a small Bluetooth speaker and was playing old music, the kind Robert and I both grew up with. And when I came in, Robert was tapping one finger on the blanket in time with something from the 1970s. We sat together for 3 hours. I read to him a little. Carol stepped out for coffee and came back with 3 cups, and we drank them and talked about the business, carefully at first, and then with more ease, as he visibly relaxed into planning mode, which for Robert had always been a kind of medicine. I didn't tell him what I'd done. That conversation would come, but not yet. He was still healing, and I was not going to lay that weight on him until he had the strength to carry it. I drove home at 6, made dinner, watched the evening news without much attention, fell asleep in the chair where I've been falling asleep in front of the television since 1987. My phone rang at 9:22. Marcus. Grandpa. His voice was the voice of someone who has had the ground removed from under them. Flat, disoriented, unsure which way was up. I said, I assume you're home. What is this? What is this? I'm reading this, and what is? You changed the will? Yes. You can't just change the will. I already did, I said. 6 days ago. It's been executed and filed. And the apartment, he said. I got a notice. I got a letter, certified mail. The silence. Grandpa. A different quality now. Younger. The sound of someone who has not been frightened in a long time, suddenly remembering what it feels like. You can't do this. I said nothing. I'm your family. His voice cracked slightly on the word. You can't disinherit family. You can, I said. And I did. Because I went on vacation? His tone shifted, climbing toward something louder. Because I took 11 days for my birthday? That's unbelievable. I was going to come back and see Dad, I told you. You were going to come back and see him, I said, when it was convenient. After the fun was finished. I have a photo of you at a casino on the same morning your father's heart monitor went off at 2 in the morning. Did you know that? Did you know about the 2 a.m. alarm? Did you know his cardiologist came in unscheduled that Wednesday because of a reading that concerned her? Silence. You didn't know because you didn't ask. Not once. 11 days, Marcus. 12 posts. 0 calls to the hospital. I have every post printed. I have every text. I counted. A long silence. Then, quieter. I didn't know it was that bad. You didn't ask, I said again. He's my father. His voice broke on the word father. A genuine fracture, not performance. I know he is. I sat down in Dorothy's chair at the kitchen table. Through the window, the forsythia had gone fully yellow in the last few days, lit up in the darkness by the porch light. I looked at it. I said, Marcus, I want you to understand something. I'm not doing this to hurt you. I'm not angry in the way you might think. I'm doing this because the only language some lessons speak is consequence. Your grandmother knew this. She used to say, the things we don't pay for, we don't value. She said that about a lot of things. I want to make it right, he said. Tell me what to do. Go to the hospital tomorrow, I said. Go early. Don't call first, don't announce it, just go. Bring nothing. Stay all day. When your father asks why you weren't there sooner, tell him the truth. Don't explain it. Just tell him the truth and let him feel what he feels. A pause. And the will? He asked. The apartment? I held the phone and looked at the forsythia. The yellow was extraordinary in that light. I said, the will is the will. That is done. As for the apartment, you have until May 1st, which is 60 days from the notice, which is the legal requirement. You're 28 years old with a job and a salary, and you can find a place to live. I heard him breathing, the sound of someone trying to locate themselves in a new landscape. Grandpa. His voice was different now, stripped of the edges. I'm sorry. I know you are, I said. Do you think Dad will forgive me? I thought about Robert in that bed, tapping his finger to old music. I thought about the 9 nights he'd slept in a hospital chair beside his mother. I thought about the way he'd asked, quietly, in those foggy, medicated moments, whether his son had called. Your father, I said, has more forgiveness in him than he deserves to have given to him. That's who he is. I'm not him. A long silence. I'll go tomorrow, he said. Go early, I said. And Marcus, don't bring coffee or flowers or whatever you think makes a good entrance. Just go. Just be there. Okay. Good night, I said. I set the phone on the table. The kitchen was quiet. The refrigerator hummed the way it always has. Outside, the forsythia burned yellow against the dark. I sat there for a long time. Dorothy used to sit in that same chair and do her planning for the tutoring sessions. She'd have stacks of workbooks and reading lists spread across the table, and she'd go through them with a methodical attention that she brought to everything she cared about. She cared about those kids from the East Side, the way she cared about everything. Completely, practically, without sentiment, but with a great deal of feeling underneath. There was a girl she'd mentioned often in her last years, a 10-year-old named Amara, whose mother worked double shifts and whose reading was 3 grades behind. Dorothy had worked with her for 2 full school years. When Dorothy got sick and had to stop volunteering, she'd written Amara a letter. She'd made me promise to mail it. I still remembered mailing it, standing at the corner box 2 days after Dorothy was first hospitalized, dropping it in, standing there for an extra moment in the cold. I opened my laptop. I went to the Millbrook Community Foundation website. There was a section about their programs, the after-school reading initiative, the tutoring partnerships, the summer literacy camps. There were photos of kids at tables with books, kids raising their hands, kids beaming at cameras, with the particular pride of someone who has just understood something they couldn't understand before. I sat there for a while looking at those photos. Dorothy's legacy begins, I thought. That was the word for it. Not revenge, not punishment. Legacy. Marcus went to the hospital Sunday morning. Carol texted me at 9:15. He's here. Just showed up. He and Robert are talking. I drove there at noon. I parked and sat in the car for a few minutes before going in. When I got to Robert's room, Marcus was there, in the chair beside the bed, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees, talking. Robert was listening. I stood in the doorway for a moment without them seeing me. I couldn't hear the words, but I could see Robert's face, and it had the careful, searching expression of a man deciding something. I went to the cafeteria and had coffee and let them have the time they needed. 2 hours later, Marcus came and found me. He sat down across from me, and he looked like he'd been crying, or close to it. He was 28, but in that moment he looked younger than that, the way people sometimes do when something strips the performance away. He said, he wasn't angry. He said he understood. I held my coffee cup. I said, "Your father is a better man than most." Marcus nodded. He looked at the table. He said, "I've been thinking about what you said, about the difference between a mistake and a choice." "Good," I said. He looked up. "I don't know if I can fix it." "You can't fix it," I said. "It happened. What you can do is be different going forward. That's all anyone can do." He was quiet. I said, "Your father needs 3 more weeks in here, and then he needs months of careful recovery at home. He can't run the business. Carol can't do it alone. You can step up, or you can continue as you have been, but you'll have to live with whichever one you choose, the way we all live with our choices." "I'll step up," he said. He said it quietly, without performance, which was the first time I'd heard him say something that way. "We'll see," I thought, but I didn't say it out loud. I drove home that afternoon through early spring streets. The light had the quality it gets in March, thin and clear, like the city had been washed overnight and set out to dry. I stopped at the florist on Meridian and bought yellow tulips, Dorothy's flowers, which I hadn't bought in a while because they were always her thing, and buying them alone had always felt like arriving somewhere to find the door locked. I drove to the cemetery. I parked and walked across the grass to where she was, and I set the flowers in the holder at the base of the stone, and I stood there for a few minutes in that March light. I told her about the foundation, about the will, about Amara, the reading program, the kids from the East Side, who were going to have their futures shaped in small, real ways by money that had accumulated through decades of careful living and was now going somewhere that deserved it. The forsythia along the cemetery fence was just beginning to bloom, yellow along every branch, the same shade as the tulips I'd brought. I stood there until I was ready to leave, and then I got in my car and drove back to the hospital to sit with my son.